about to start, so a very warm welcome to all the attendees and panelists for today. Today's webinar is designed to provide you with all practical information you might need before the main event Clusters Meet Regions set to happen later this month, 26th and 27th of April in Vilnius, Lithuania. Today we will introduce the topics that will be addressed at the event in Vilnius, such as responses to supply chain disruptions, cluster activities, and the challenges posed to these activities by the current geopolitical situation. The main purpose for today is to help participants better prepare for the main event in Vilnius and determine what elements of the program are most relevant to them. The webinar will be recorded and posted later on the European Cluster Collaboration Platform website, as well as on the other European Cluster Collaboration Platform social media channels. So before starting, we would like to address the housekeeping rules. Please note, as I said, that the session will be recorded as well as posted. Your microphones are muted, so please, all the participants, use the chat function to comment and ask questions. We will be taking the notes during the entire webinar and we will be answering to those questions, but as well as if some information can be provided in the meantime, we will be getting in touch after the webinar. If you would like to address a question, raise your hand, or as said, please use the chat function. And for those that are not speaking, please mute your microphones. And when start speaking, can unmute and switch on your cameras. So now let's move to the agenda for today. We will be hearing the introduction given from the European Commission, the European Commission actions to help industry strengthen resilience and address geopolitical challenges. After that, we will be seeing the overview of the Lithuanian clusters, as well as the challenges and prospects for key sectors and ecosystems. This covering the automotive, agri-food, plastics, semiconductors, photovoltaics, and wood industries. We will hear the funding opportunities and financial schemes, as well as the regional approach, supply chain and Baltic clusters. Later on, at the final stage of the webinar today, we will be giving practical information for the 26th and the 27th, the 2 days of the event, as well as be giving information about the overall run of the agenda, registration, and important dates. So I would like now to open the floor and to give the floor to Mr. Jakub Boratinsky, Director for Network and Governance at DG GROW European Commission.
So good morning. Thank you very much, Teodora, for giving me the floor. I hope you can hear and see me. Okay, great. Well, I must say that the context of this first event is quite extraordinary. I mean, we see, the war in Ukraine basically going on, and of course, I think all of us have been extremely under the impression of the atrocities that have been committed. In any way, the event today is I think, also, a preparation of our actions that are, ways of mitigating this very negative impact of the war on the economy. So again, let me welcome to this webinar, which is indeed, a great occasion to engage in the efforts to EU matchmaking of supply chains. We meet here to attract your attention to the event that would be held at the end of the month with the European Commission, and we are very grateful for the collaboration with the Lithuanian Ministry of Economy, as well as European Clusters and Enterprise Europe Network. So Europe's and its economy is facing an enormous challenge, and I think this is really time for Europe to show unity and to face in a decisive way this unprecedented challenge. I would like to give you an overview of the Commission actions of trying to mitigate the negative impacts of the war in Ukraine, but I think this is also in a way an opportunity to strengthen our resilience also, in more broader terms. I'm representing the DG, which is in a way a custodian, a guardian of the single market, and we strongly believe, this is really a key element of our answer. And this is also for us a tool how we can strengthen basically the strategic supplies across the EU, across the Union, which are affected by the current conflict. We have seen that the disruptions are being caused in a number of critical areas, including energy, raw materials, as well as food. And I think we see also potentially a very negative implications of that if we speak about food security, not just for Europe, for the world at large. Several member states are relying and very strongly on exports of raw and processed materials from Russia and Ukraine. And these countries have also been large export markets for many manufactured products from Europe. Now we could see, that these markets are now at least temporarily lost, and we also see a spike in prices of energy, which obviously has also an impact on our energy intensive industry. As part of the Commission response, and the decision was taken, and it was also, let's say, the initiative of the Commission Thierry Breton personally, to set up the task force of supply chain disruptions, where DG Grow is taking the lead. We have been very grateful that in that work we could count on the role of cluster networks and specifically, also European Cluster Collaboration Platform at European and Enterprise Europe Network as a way to mobilize European businesses. And in that context, over past weeks, we have, with the collaboration of colleagues from the clusters, we have managed to set up the forum EU Clusters Support Ukraine, which is a platform allowing to match humanitarian aid offered by EU businesses and respond to the needs expressed by Ukrainian clusters and companies. For example, through that process, through that platform, we have been able to bring together suppliers of water purification system or hemostatic tourniquets with Ukrainian partners. The second initiative is the supply chain resilience platform, which is an open marketplace matching European SMEs which are facing supply chain disruption with alternative suppliers. After 2 weeks, we managed to gather 280 profiles, and I think this is also a call for you to join this initiative. It is a way to help those who lost importers or export markets in Russia, Belarus. Is a tool to find new partners. But beyond, let's say, this specific and let's say directly felt challenges related to the disruptions that European businesses are facing, we need to look, let's say, beyond to the issue of strategic dependencies. As part of our new industrial strategy, we have analyzed that this is an issue of critical importance for EU strategic a reason to redouble our efforts in this direction. We completed 2 in-depth reviews of EU strategic dependencies. The most recent one was published 2 months ago. What we see is that relevant strategic dependencies exist across several key industrial ecosystems. They range from basic products and inputs such as magnesium or two actually very sophisticated technologies, if we look at semiconductors or supply chain in the domain of cybersecurity. We are actually not just, monitoring these dependencies, but we are actually taking decisive action to address those. Some of the examples include, industrial alliance on battery, circular plastics, raw materials, and hydrogen. So the range of our industrial alliances, which are the way to boost investments in key areas to reduce our dependency on fossil fuels. We are taking action in the area of standardization on key topics such as energy resilience. And also, very importantly, we want to look into the future defense capabilities. And this is also the way where the standardization work can be of important contribution. We are looking on making sure that permitting procedures are faster for the deployment of renewable energy installations. Already after the outbreak of the war, we have the Versailles Declaration of the European Council, which gave an extremely strong message to secure EU supply of critical materials by means of strategic partnerships with like-minded countries, but also looking into issues such as strategic stockpiling and promoting a circular economy and resource efficiency. I mean, all those things have been somehow in the pipeline, but I think the reality of the war is definitely a reason to accelerate and move faster on this path. Well, let me also give maybe, for the sake of the context, brief information about other measures. I mean, first of all, also notably in view of what has happened over the weekend, what has been discovered in Bucha, Commission is preparing, the work which would lead to a very likely adoption of the next package of sanctions by EU member states tomorrow. We are also looking into issues such as how to use flexibility under state aid rules that would actually, allow, for example, to compensate companies for additional cost increased due to high gas and electricity prices. We need very much to look into the issue of export credits and insurance. It is so important that we actually help our Ukrainian partners, the Ukrainian economy, to stay afloat, but being able to continue to, for example, to export goods to the EU from those territories that are not directly affected by military activities. Regarding antitrust, the European Competition Network will not actively intervene against strictly necessary and temporary measures which aim at avoiding severe disruption by the impact of the war. Then, finally, let me stress, the main focus of this of the future event in Lithuania and the preparatory seminar today is actually to look into the impact of the war on European economy. But of course, it is of absolutely fundamental importance that we take collectively a variety of measures to support Ukraine. That includes support to Ukrainian refugees. Later today, the Commission will be adopting a recommendation on fast-track recognition of professional qualifications of Ukrainian refugees arriving in Europe, so that they can actually have a quick and effective access to labor market and they can do basically quality jobs. We are also working with the colleagues across the Commission on a range of initiatives which would support Ukrainian entrepreneurs, arriving in Europe to continue their business activity. Finally, the event in Lithuania, we are very much looking forward, where we started to plan this event as first of the serious event happening in Europe. Again, we didn't have the war in mind, but it comes indeed in a very useful moment, given, of course, the fact that the Baltic Sea region is the one which is probably most directly affected by what's happening in Ukraine. In that context, we are extremely happy to have an excellent cooperation with the Lithuanian Ministry of Economy, as well as the Cluster and Enterprise Europe Network community in Lithuania in preparation of this event. The aim is indeed to strengthen the supply chain within the Baltic region and wider EU single market. This would be an excellent occasion to also, I think, meet in person, to learn from each other, and to basically see how, in view of this very difficult situation, we can actually still, help business opportunities to be fully utilized. With this, I'm again, wishing you a very constructive and fruitful workshop today. We hope to see many of you in Lithuania, and again, we are, as you know, we will continue with the series of matchmaking events across Europe. So thanks a lot, and I give the floor back to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jakub, for this overview. And indeed, it is very important to look at the impact of the war and the measures that needs to be taken. I've seen in the chat has been already shared the link on the supply chain resilience platform, as well as the forum about the support for Ukraine. It is basically it's open daily, so please visit, share all the options possible. This is a plea to all the attendees. Look into the needs that the colleagues from Ukraine are sharing, as well as all the possible actions to support. This is the place to be to share it. So now, to continue further with the program, I would like to give the floor to our colleagues from Lithuania to provide the overview of the Lithuanian clusters. So I believe Christina is with us. She's the coordinator of Agri-Food Lithuania, as well as cluster manager, digital innovations. So Christina, my pleasure to give you the floor. Please.
Thank you very much, Theodora. Hello, everyone. Thank you for my introduction. Yes, today I'm going to be representing Lithuanian clusters ecosystem. I am also of our national Lithuanian clusters network director, and I'm also a coordinator of one of the clusters in Lithuania of Agri-Food Lithuania. The next slide, please. As mentioned before by Jakub Boratinsky, I would one more time mention that Baltic region is not only seeing in the closest and being the closest to the Ukraine brutalities and all the war going down, but Lithuania, even though being a small country, has been for a long time known as the main advocate for the Ukraine. And it's only the saddest part that we are witnessing today this reality, those threats and war, which before was only talked and discussed and not weighted at all. So I would encourage European community to join initiatives for the cluster support for the Ukraine, as mentioned before, the platform, and help in any ways that we can. We need to stick together and in order to provide this humanitarian aid and to continue to provide aid to the Ukraine. Of course, all our businesses in EU, we need to stay stronger. And I think clusters are the main and key players who can do that. So very briefly, I'm going to start from just a quick notice, and that not only the whole world, but economy will never be the same after the war, or what we are witnessing right now, the changes in geopolitics, changing our main economy understanding. And if we need to survive, if we need to be successful as businesses, as clusters, I think we need to continue on the main principles as the adaptation to survive. We need to progress. Now it's probably the best time not to stand in one place, and it's more than ever very important to continue on our goals, which was drawn by the twin transition, on the Green Deal and digitalization, adapt to our local areas, adapt to the changing conditions, use, of course, safe raw materials to provide the usage of to ensure the usage of raw materials in our local markets, and of course, efficiently utilize the resources of materials and energy. So again, I think clusters uniting together, they can achieve all those goals. And if we would look at the overall ecosystem of clusters in Lithuania, I can probably say that even though we are small, Lithuania has quite many quality clusters. If we would be talking what kind of cluster policy we have in Lithuania, we just have approved in 2020 the new cluster development policy in Lithuania, where we underline that the main objective is to promote industrial transformation and integration into international strategic value chains. And the new cluster concept is based on the existing level of cluster maturity in Lithuania, and we have many mature clusters, and of course their economic and innovation potential in pursuit of the country's economic growth. The main objectives of the cluster development policy was to promote formation of local short value-added chains and clusters, of course, to increase the added value created by clusters, and to develop cluster research and experimental development potential, to promote cluster members' integration into international value chains, what we are talking today about, and which is very important topic to be talked about. And of course, to promote clusters overall and their benefits and potential. Over the last 2 years, Lithuanian cluster community, as you see, has been growing significantly and progressing. So if we are just looking at the numbers that in, for example, I'm sorry, if you could go back. Yeah. If we would be looking at the numbers, for example, in 2016, we had around only 38 clusters, and then later on, we already had more than 60 clusters, which are existing. And if we would look an overall picture of the clusters, where they are located in Lithuania overall, so the main thing would be noticed that Lithuanian clusters are distributing in the regions, which is very important again, when we are talking about the future upcoming event. We are talking about clusters value bringing into the regions and helping regions development. Lithuanian clusters are very active, not only on national level, but also on the international scene, and working and participating in many different international networks. Many of them hold bronze and silver labels. Next slide, please. Yes. If we would look also a couple years ago, now we can see that clusters and cluster members are concentrating very much into working and creating new innovative solutions, working together and investing into research and development and technology implementation, working for the new markets, implementing their abilities for the new markets, working with their employees. Reskilling, upskilling is a new and very important, new competences gaining is a new, very important investing area for the Lithuanian clusters. And of course, export. We are concentrating for the export on the high value products. Next slide, please. As I said, international cooperation has been growing very rapidly. Also in Lithuania, Lithuanian clusters are participating in different big consortiums, going for the Horizon projects, participating in international networks, very active in the knowledge sharing, actively inviting their partners to share their knowledges and etc. Next slide, please. So what are the main sectors that we are concentrating in Lithuania? Based on our recently adapted new roadmap for the Lithuanian clusters to be integrated into the international value chains, our government has approved 6 main strategic sectors. I won't go very deep into those sectors since we have time limits today, but you later on will be able to find more information, more detailed information on ECCP platform, or if wanted, please contact me directly if you will have questions, for example, on what kind of industries we are interested for, and for what kind of B2B connections we are looking in Lithuania. So basically, our main 6 strategic sectors are industrial information and communication technologies, engineering industry, health technologies and biotechnologies, chemicals, energy and sustainable environment, and innovative and high value added traditional industries. Those would be, of course, agri-food, textile, and wood industries. And if somebody has a question, for example, how those industries, do they relate to our region smart specialization strategy in Lithuania? For example, we do not have yet straight
I think we've lost for a second Christina, so we'll try to connect her with her. So basically she can continue the presentation. In the meantime, I would like to remind that all the information that you see on the different slides, as well as the recording, but also the slides from our panelists today, will be shared with all the participants. So you will have an access to this information. But also, as Christina said, you may contact her directly if there is a need for further information on the different priority sectors. Christina, you hear me?
Yes, I'm sorry, technical issues. I was for some reason dropped out. So please, next slide.
Thank you.
Yeah, in a very short way, I'm going to introduce our biggest, most excellent clusters, which are going to be participating in our B2B session in Vilnius, and very welcoming for the European partners to join and find the connections and collaboration. So first of all, Smart Food Cluster representing agri-food sector. That's our one of the biggest food manufacturers connecting clusters in Lithuania. As you can see, they have more than 106 members with 900 million euros turnover. So they're looking for the international partners, of course, for the collaboration and other B2B activities. Next slide, please. Next cluster is Agri-Food Lithuania, DIG, also representing agri-food sector, working with different kind of technology implementation into agri-food sector. And the uniqueness of this cluster is in the sense that it's not only the cluster, but on the basis, on the foundation of the cluster, there was a digital innovation hub built. So on one side, it is a cluster, and on the other, it is digital innovation hub. And it's working with all the main different technologies, working through a whole food value chain. So they're also looking for different activities and collaboration with partners. Next slide, please. Lithuanian Automotive Export Association, LOGEA, working with the automotive sector. We're very active on national level and also very active and ready for the collaboration on the international level with the different challenges going connected with the Ukraine war and with the challenges coming also with the Chinese conflict that was experiencing Lithuania lately and experiencing different disruptions of value chain. They're also ready to communicate and collaborate on different initiatives. Next slide, please. Our also excellent cluster representing plastic sector in Lithuania. They're the biggest one with the 107 million euro of turnover. Also, Limpra represents engineering industry, working with the raw materials, and the biggest and the most known cluster in Lithuania of its kind. And looking for the collaboration on the international, of course, projects. They're very big and working right now on different initiatives concerning, for example, technology parks building in Lithuania and etc. Next slide, please. Photovoltaic technologies cluster, TETEC. These are very I would say they even are more international working cluster than on the national level. They're participating very actively in the different initiatives, and of course, looking for the partners, looking for participation even more actively in the different projects. They're very active on R&D projects and looking for the possible collaboration. Next slide, please. Laser engineering technologies cluster LITEC. Laser cluster LITEC is also very active on the national and international levels, participating in different EU initiatives, very actively participating on international networks and knowledge sharing in R&D projects, and also looking for different partners and very welcoming partners from EU to continue to talk on possible collaboration. Next slide, please. Lithuanian wooden house cluster representing wooden industry in Lithuania. That also, as all others mentioned before, is the biggest cluster of its kind in Lithuania, with the more than 55 million euros for the turnover, and also they're active not only on national but international level. Of course, now with the war going on, facing the challenges, disrupted value chain, supply value chain, and looking, of course, for the partners to collaborate and join new projects. Next slide, please. And I think this is the end of my presentation. Yes, so if you need more detailed information on the clusters, you can contact me, for example, directly, or more information, detailed information will be available on ECCP platform, and of course on the platform for registering for the B2B sessions. So we're really looking forward and welcoming all European Union clusters community to Vilnius in April 26th and 27th. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christina, for this overview. It is obvious we've seen the growth from the numbers that you have demonstrated, as well as the industrial and the geographical coverage. But as you said, the biggest opportunity for all participants would be really to speak and to go deeper of the understanding and to exchange information is by attending the event in person or online in Vilnius later this month. So to continue with the program for today, we are entering now in the section to oversee the challenges and prospects for key sectors and ecosystems. So we will hear the different key sectors and involvement from the European Commission and DG Growth. So I would like to welcome on the stage Alexander Lazarevich, who will be presenting about the automotive. Alexander, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Theodora. I hope you can hear me well.
Yes.
A warm welcome to all the participants from Brussels. Before perhaps we dive in the presentation which I have prepared, just like to set the tone and provide the context for the sector, which is of enormous importance for the EU economy. Namely, I would like to draw attention to the fact that the situation that we are facing now with the war in Ukraine and the sanctions on Russia have not really triggered the process of reflection on challenges and prospects in the sector. This has already started a number of years ago in the sector, as it has been already facing the challenges of dual transition. But indeed, with the update of the industrial strategy and industrial strategy itself, we have laid the foundations for the acceleration of this process of dual transition, and we have also placed the onus on one important, so far underrepresented ingredient, and that is the resilience of the value chain. And perhaps this comes nicely, or sits nicely in the context of today's discussion. Perhaps the next slide, please. One more, thank you. So just to paint the importance of the sector, with some 14 million vehicles manufactured in the EU and then exported as well in a large quantities across the globe. The sector contributes to the surplus on the EU trade side with the 76.3 billion euros, and the sector itself invests over 60 billion euros in research and development. Hence the importance of the sector also for the technological progress of the EU economy. Also, as regards the employment, directly employs 2.6 million people, with that being extended down the value chain, with the indirect employment covering about or providing jobs to 12.6 million people, which is equivalent to a bit less than 7% of all EU jobs. But as I said, the sector has been facing for a while the dramatic shift to zero emission mobility, and also greater automation and connectivity, and this has very much to do also with the growing competition that comes from our major competitors on one side, from the other side of the Atlantic, from the US, and then even more imminent threat that comes from China. And I do believe that the stakeholders which are dealing with Russia are pretty familiar with the difficulties of dealing with the China as a market economy. But let us move to the next slide, please. So let me outline briefly what measures have we taken as a response to this mounting challenges, and in order to facilitate the adaptation of the sector. We've come up last year with a Fit for 55 package, which has provided basically the foundation for or has reconfirmed the objectives of the emission reduction in the transport sector by 90%. And as a direct response to that, we as a commission are coming with the proposals on the sectoral specific proposals, which try to address or try to bring into force new standards for cars and vans, with one very important objective, that is to phase out all combustion engines by 2035. So I'm referring here to cars and vans. So we do also have trucks and buses, and for those the deadline will be slightly delayed. But that is also coming up. And then since we will have by, this is our estimation, by 2050, still on the market some 20% of cars and 65% of heavy-duty vehicles with combustion engines, despite the fact of this cutoff date by 2035. We are putting forward also this July the new Euro 7 proposal with even stricter emission limits as regards the tailpipe emissions, but we are at the same time also addressing particular numbers for from the brakes and from the tire wear, and obviously we are looking that we will be providing sufficient boost also for the technologies that are based on the internal combustion engine system that will be more cost effective. Then the next slide, please. As regards the vehicle automation, and we have already started this process with the review of the type approval requirements for the small series vehicles, and now we will expand this to the entire type approval, is the adoption of the implementing rules for the type approval of fully automated vehicles. And this is also partly an exercise which we're doing in conjunction with the review of regulations in the UNEC in Geneva. Supporting this work, we are also coming, we will also be proposing this year a new legislative proposal on access to vehicle data, which will complement the Horizontal Data Act that was adopted by the Commission. And now coming to the basically the point where I think we have the intersection indeed with the situation in Ukraine now. It's the risks which are associated with the global supply chains. The next slide, please. Yes, thank you. So what we are seeing, or what has been reported to us by the industry, by the associations of industrial manufacturers, suppliers, etc., the most immediate shortfall is in the shortage of wiring harnesses. So these are mainly sourced from the Ukraine, or have been sourced up until now, and this is putting basically a stop to a number of assembly lines in the EU manufacturing plants. Then, as a response to the aggression of Russia, of course, we have introduced a number of sanctions, and there have been also counter sanctions being proposed by Russia, which have an impact on sourcing of primary and raw materials from Russia. As you know, in the automotive industry, there's quite a huge dependence on the raw materials as regards the aluminium, steel, nickel, but there are also some other more precious materials like palladium and platinum that are in the ranges up to 50% being sourced from Russia. And obviously, the industry is looking for the alternatives. It will take time to readjust the sourcing. It will be more costly, and above all, as I mentioned, it will take time and patience. Next slide, please. We are expecting, as a result of shortage and of sourcing of raw materials, but at the same time, as a result of the increased demand we are anticipating that this will, and it's been already manifested so far, as a important hike in cost of sourcing these materials. So the competition for this rather now scarce resources will obviously lead to the higher prices of raw materials, and we've seen that also on the energy side, and also in the shipping, so in the transportation. How is the Commission responding to this, or how has the Commission been already responding prior to the situation in Ukraine? We have adopted set up the European Raw Materials Alliance. I believe that we have a colleague who will talk about this. In fact, what we are trying to do now is that we are trying to fast track some of the projects that we have identified in order to basically accelerate the process of establishing a more self-sufficient supply chains of raw materials in the EU. Where has all this started? It was in the 2020 where we have faced, and this is of a huge importance for the automotive sector in particular, the shortages in supply of semiconductors, which have put to a halt the car production. So the damage was even bigger than it was basically with the stopping of production due to the outbreak of COVID, and the production has dropped in some areas between 20 to 30%. Next slide, please. We have also set up in 2021 as a direct response to this, and with a view to identify current gaps in production of microchips and technology developments, an alliance on processors and semiconductor technologies. And we have also adopted the European Chips Act in February, which will provide the investment climate to ensure that there is sufficient security of supply along the entire value chain. And I believe we're talking here about the value of investment ranging around beyond 40 billion euro. This brings me to one of the perhaps critical points of the transition and building of resilience of the EU value chain, since we will always be dependent on someone, on third countries that will source materials. It comes a key of recycling. So the question of recycling: how can we, to the best extent, recycle existing materials that are already contained in our products? And there's a basically completely new take on the circular business model economy, and how to improve the efficiency of recycling. Next slide, please. To that end, we are now reviewing end-of-life vehicle directive, and we will do the same in the type approval directive with respect to the issues of vehicle reusability, recyclability, and recoverability. And we believe that this is a direct link to reducing strategic dependency on critical raw materials, if, of course, they can be properly reused and recycled or recovered, and will reduce our overall vulnerabilities in the supply chain. And of course, at the same time, also deal with another important element that is reducing the environmental footprint of our industries. Next slide, please. Yeah, that really brings me to the end of my presentation, where I would just like to inform everyone present in this webinar that the Commission has launched a series of discussions across different ecosystems with stakeholders, with a view to promote green and digital transition, and of course to support building up the resilience of the value chain. And as regards the mobility sector, where the automotive sits as one of the three important subsectors, the two others being railway and then maritime, is that we have launched a public consultation on a staff working document where we have tried to paint different scenarios or predict different scenarios on for the transition pathways on how to render our ecosystem more resilient, innovative, and sustainable. And the consultation will end on the 29th of April. And we are looking to receive feedback from all the stakeholders. Of course, so far we have received feedback from the classic stakeholders, from the industry associations, car association, suppliers. But of course, we are looking to extend our outreach and potentially also to cover the participants today in the webinar. So with that, I give back the floor to Theodora. I hope I was not too long, but thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Alexander. And with regards to your latest the latest information you've shared, I would suggest if there is a link or certain information to be shared, we could, with regards to the feedback, we can put it on the chat as well. But also, as mentioned earlier, we will be distributing information from that webinar, so the participants could give their feedback and take participation. So in order to keep the time, as we are already going a bit late from the original program and schedule, we directly will go now to the agri-food, and I would love to give the floor to Helen de Andac, so she can present the challenges and prospects for that sector. Helen, the floor is yours.
Yes, good morning. Can you hear me well? Yes, excellent. Yes, so I will present you actually the strategy which is has been recently adopted by the Commission to answer to the present crisis, which you will see is fully in the direct continuation of the Farm to Fork strategy and all the actions that we were in the process of implementing up to now. Next slide, please. And you can already move to the, so yes, so I'm going to present you this new food communication, which was adopted by the Commission, which is actually about improving the resilience and answering directly to this crisis that we are currently going through. So this is why it is important to see that this war in Ukraine has a considerable impact on food systems. But it's actually exacerbating tensions which were pre-existing because before the invasion, you could already see that there were some issues in terms of supplies, increases in the prices of certain food commodities, inflation on food prices in the EU. So the disruptions or tensions or difficulties in the international supply chains and a number of other factors were already making it quite difficult actually to maintain the same prices, and the food inflation was already a huge challenge. Now it is becoming even more important. But globally, it is important to look at what are the different factors and what are the different consequences of now this Ukraine situation, which are really the most challenging and which require very urgently, solutions or at least measures to mitigate the impact, and where also then you can, especially you agri-food clusters, potentially contribute. So of course, first, worry is about the situation on the Ukrainian territory and on making sure that yes, there is food availability in Ukraine. And on helping on all fronts there. So I will not get into the details on what we are doing there, but also making sure that there is also, yes, food can be brought. So and that's, of course, the first priority. But where do we see that the situation has a major impact and major risk is with regard to the fact that Ukraine is a major wheat and maize and sunflower producer, and that the exports of their past production, which is still stored there, is actually jeopardized because of the fact that transport by ship is not possible anymore. The actual harvesting of what the winter wheat is compromised in a significant part of the country where they are in a war situation, or very simply because they lack actually, for example, fuel for the tractors, and the sowing of next summer's crops like sunflowers is also compromised on large parts of the territory. So we are collaborating with the Ukrainians at least to facilitate the export of cereals through alternative transportation means, like for example by train. But we have to be aware that the situation with regard to wheat production and wheat exports remains challenging, and that it might have international consequences which are quite important for countries, especially in the Middle East and Africa, which highly depend on those wheat imports. It can already be seen in the doubling almost of the prices of wheat futures, and it means that the bill for feeding the population in those countries is increasingly tremendously, because typically, yes, basic food is actually subsidized. So the other issue which is very important is this, the fact that the fuel and the gas prices have increased considerably, and it impacts them directly on the price of fertilizers, especially the nitrogen fertilizers. And so it means that it could also lead to eventually some reduction of the productivity if some less fertilizers are needed, are used, and then in the midterm that we absolutely need to do something to reduce our dependency on EU territories, on EU farms, on those imports of fertilizers. And finally, it means also that for even the EU, for the citizens which have a tight budget on the feeding their family might be challenging, and so we're going to mobilize different tools. So next slide, please. So I've explained you the context. So this is why. So to help the farmers, because the farmers are faced with the increases in prices of, especially of fertilizers, but also the prices of fuel. There is facility for support of 500 million, which have been mobilized. So that's one thing. Also we're going to try to compensate the imports, which we cannot have anymore, probably to a certain extent, from Ukraine, especially for animal feed like maize and or the alternatives to sunflower oil cakes for animal feed, by bringing additional agricultural land into production, the one which normally are into fallow. So there's a number of things that we are doing. Next slide, please. But the most important, and I think that's the most interesting potentially for your clusters, having looked at the presentation on where you are, you have expertise, is everything which could actually help to reduce our dependency on the inputs of gas and fuels and inputs, and such as pesticides and fertilizers. So investments in all the technologies which will enable, for example, alternative ways to produce fertilizers, which will enable sustainable biogas production, everything which is precision farming, which enables also to reduce significantly the use of fertilizer. Anything which is more agroecological practices, which enable again to reduce this use, and there's going to be also investments in different also new techniques. To actually like the development of new genomic techniques to create plant varieties that are less susceptible to changing temperatures and climatic threats. So there's lots of potential with that regard. We know that the situation on the general challenges to the ecosystem remains and will not improve, and so this adaptability, better adaptability to the climate change of plants is something which is important. So I think there are potentials there for and all the companies in the EU which have technologies or the capacity to develop new technologies and new products. Next slide, please. So in general, all of that, of course, is in full continuation of the farm to fork and biodiversity strategies. There were some voices at the beginning of this ongoing crisis calling for then having, some temporary freeze or going less quickly in this direction of having a more sustainable farm and food systems. But actually, sustainability is and improving sustainability is even more important in the present context, because we really need to reduce this dependency on the fertilizers to the largest extent possible. So that's something which is very important. We also need to keep in mind, that also soil fertility can be addressed to other elements. It's an ecosystem, the soil, and we have also soil strategy, which is also addressing all the different aspects of the soil fertility. You cannot just continue pouring necessarily always fertilizer on it. There's different aspects. Finally, I think, and that's what is very, very important, and which is clearly mentioned also in the communication, is to help also the food system in general to be less dependent on the fossil fuel, and to be then potentially less impacted by variations in the price of energy, is to really accelerate the use of renewable energy across the whole food system. So it starts on the farms, where there's a potential to put in place windmills, solar panels, all sorts of different systems and techniques. But the whole food system and the food transformation industry also should really be encouraged to actually invest and deploy more renewable energy technologies. Next slide, please. So this is one of the elements of the EU Code of Conduct on these responsible food business and marketing practices, which is a bit presenting a strategy on the transformation towards sustainability and more healthy diets of the food system in the EU. Next slide, please. This code of conduct was proposed in the context of the Farm to Fork strategy, but it was developed really by industry. So the Commission facilitated, let's say, the dialogue between the different actors, between the different partners, and facilitated the established the definition of the different objectives. But the whole idea was to have actually with this code, a clear and structured picture of the different little different elements on which the food industry can work to improve its sustainability, and also to improve providing a more healthy food to people. Next slide, please. So this the code has two parts. One with these aspirational objectives, which are the ones which can be selected, and to which we hope that all the food industry actors will aspire progressively. And then also a framework for pledges with more ambitious concrete commitments by individual companies. Next slide, please. So those aspirational objectives start with this healthy, balanced, and sustainable diets for all European consumers. One of those, and which has been already mentioned for many years, and but which can be sometimes culturally a bit more challenging, is also moving towards a more plant-based diets. And why do I mention that now in this present context? Because one of the main issues and challenges that we are faced with within the EU is our dependency on imports of different proteins for animal feed. So basically, there's been declarations, and there's already a number of actions in place to increase the production of leguminous crops across EU territory. But it would be extremely challenging, almost impossible, to compensate all the different sources of animal feed that we import within the EU. We have a very strong dependency. So we need to find there a balance and move towards a better balance of food with probably less meat consumption, more protein, vegetable protein. And that's something which is going to be very important. And there again, there are potential, there's the market potential for the companies which would be able to develop some, tasty and attractive products based on the vegetable proteins for the consumers. And I will not get into the detail of everything. I'm just trying to identify where there is a potential for your clusters and where there's the biggest need of market and industry, innovation and reaction, because this situation on animal feed is really very, very difficult for the time being. So it's clear that it's not from in a few months' time that we will be able to move towards finding alternative sources of encouraging, let's say, the European consumers to change totally their diets, but over the long term, that is even more important. Then prevention and reduction of food loss and waste. We should not forget that about 30% still of food produced is lost and waste across the different across the production from the farm to the fork, across all different levels. There's significant food loss, and we should try to the largest extent possible. So there to avoid it first, and then to find maybe ways to use it and valorize it. This optimized circular and resource efficiency of food chains, deploying across the whole food value chain and in industry, new resource efficiency technologies, circularity, and the deployment of renewable energy. So I will. So that's thing. That's what is very important is that, and for in the presently, that's really the most relevant, I will say, for in reducing our dependency on the imports of fuel and reducing then the impact also of the fuel prices on the So if you could move to the next slide. There's already 117 signatories. You can move to the next ones and voila, and continue. So all different organizations, also Agroecology has signed up to the code, but also a number of companies which have agreed to have some more, ambitious sustainability and healthy products transition. So what we are now trying to do, as you can stop there, thank you, is to mobilize actually the agri-food cluster community and to encourage actually all the agri-food clusters to sign up to the code and then to collaborate on its implementation. This is why we will also use the cluster collaboration platform to present the aspirational objectives and the commitments of the different companies, and we'll use it also to actually then make the link between the code and between the technologies which enable the implementation of those objectives. Because on the cluster collaboration platform, you already have the European Resource Efficiency Knowledge Center, EREC, and this EREC is already presenting in a database the different technologies which are possible to implement to improve the circularity and this resource efficiency and deployment of renewable technologies, energy technologies. And there's a large number already of best practices there which are originating and directly relevant for the agri-food businesses. So that's why we think it's important to make a link. So we will actually then integrate there also the best practices provided by the signatories of the code. And we will also try then to have a page where the clusters which are willing to collaborate with another cluster on further developing or some technologies or implementing some technologies or are interested in finding the best technology can then post a call, because you also have, we should not forget, all those green tech clusters on the ECCP. And so there's a huge potential there or with those green tech clusters of finding new techniques eventually. And then all those, it's important to put in common the technology solution providers and the technology users, so that also maybe we can accelerate eventually the testing of new or promising technologies on everything, all the new priorities which I explained in this small presentation. So we will keep you informed about when all this information and the code is presented on the ECCP, and the link with the different technologies is done. But in the meantime, I really call upon you and your community for all the agri-food clusters to be involved. That's the first thing. I'm really making a very, very strong plea to you, because you need to collaborate together, because we need to really boost and accelerate the sustainability transition of the food businesses. Because at the end of the day, we need to be sure that we have food affordability and availability within the EU, and those elements are absolutely essential. And also because we have also a responsibility towards the rest of the world, and let's be realistic, I mean, we also have eventually to help and provide food assistance to the countries which are in a dire situation. So that is something which is very, very important. And also, yes, I'm launching a call to the green tech clusters, the ones which have technologies which are most promising for the food industry, to maybe try to also use the ECCP channel to actually then make some yes, promotion or explain or present them, so that eventually they could be seen and eventually deployed. So that's it for me. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Helene. I see very positive reactions in the chat about this, the way it has been, the information and also the initiatives. So I believe, as well as our colleagues from Agri-Food Lithuania, together with their networks, they will do a lot to encourage and more active participation. Because we are running, we are behind our schedule, I'll ask the other panelists to try to keep the timing around 5 minutes. I mean, and also all the attendees to be aware that we will be a bit late, but we will try to make everything possible to address the important topics planned for this webinar today. So I'm giving the floor now to Olga Pozlevich, going to the plastic sector. So Olga, the floor is yours. Olga? If we are having a technical problem, yes, okay. Just unmute yourself.
Yes, do you hear me now?
Everything's perfect, thank you.
Okay, good. Okay, I will be short indeed, 5 minutes. I will try to have the maximum. Okay, so on the next slide, please. I'm going to talk about the plastics industry, and will provide some facts and figures that I could accumulate, the most recent that I could find. Therefore, information will be from 2 different sources, from Eurostat and from the Plastics Europe, which is the more recent. Yeah, you can go to the next slide. Thank you. So the plastics industry, it's the industry which compounds of plastic producers, plastic converters, plastic recyclers, and plastics and rubber machinery producers. Most of the companies are SMEs, because the average amount of people per company is about 29 people. The employment in 2020 was maintained at the level of 1.5 million people. There are around 52,000, a bit less than 52,000 of companies, turnover about 330 billion euro in European Union +2. So Netherlands +3, sorry, Norway, Switzerland, and UK. And the recycling, right now we're recycling around 10 megaton of plastics. In the same time, the environmental impact, let's not forget, around 80% of marine litter is plastics. There is a huge issue of the microplastics pollution that we're trying to deal with. And I would like to use this occasion to invite participants to participate in the open public consultation, ongoing open public consultation on the initiative to reduce the unintentional release of microplastics from 6 sources, such as textiles, tires, and paints, plastic pellets, detergent capsules, and geotextiles. And as a result, 87% of Europeans are worried about the impact of the plastic products. So we have to do something to make our plastics even greener and more sustainable for the future also. In 2018, the European Union adopted a plastic strategy. It's no news, but I still would like to mention, because there are targets that we still need to achieve. And for example, one of the targets is to achieve 50% of all plastics to be recycled. So next slide, please. This is the production of plastics in Europe. Right now we are about 55 megatons of plastics, and by sector, the majority is packaging and building constructions. They're so far the largest use of plastics, and then it's automotive. Others, they include furniture, medical application, machinery, and the 6 largest European countries represent almost 70% of all market demands. Those are Germany, Italy, France, Poland, Spain, and UK. Next slide, please. This is the graph that shows the flow of plastics. You see here that the circularity rate of plastics is still rather low. It's around 14%. It's 7.5 megatons. Therefore, we have launched the Circular Plastics Alliance, and I would like to use the occasion to invite you to join our Circular Plastics Alliance. And we have the voluntary pledge to increase up to 10 million tons of the recycled plastics uptake. So the recycling, you can also see here that the landfilling is still happening. It's a very sad. 23% of plastics waste are still sent to landfill. So we are trying to do our best, and we also invite member states to ban this practice. Yes, next slide, please. The global plastic production, it's around 367 million metric tons in 2020. And you see that the Russia, in 2021, the Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus accounted together for approximately 2 and 6% of all plastics in primary forms exported from EU. So yeah, it's in 2021. So this is the data for 2020. Next slide, please. Now this is my last slide. It's about the impact of the war in Ukraine. We have already our plastics companies informed us that since you have heard this, since the amount of the trade with Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus is not such a huge numbers. So there is, for the time being, there is no major impact for most companies. However, companies which are active in East Poland have started to face transport issues. Also, we need to understand that plastics, it's also highly energy consuming, and so the dependency on gas and oil, it's totally clear, and this is something that we need to work on. But it's also in a connection with our circularity goals to increase the uptake of the recycled plastics. Like that, we can minimize the use of a fossil fuel feedstock. On the gas, for example, it was not mentioned, but I'm proudly can tell that since I'm myself Lithuanian, that Lithuania is the first country in the EU that stop and the imports of the Russian gas from April. So I suppose, and this is what will probably happen more and more often for the entire European Union, because in May we will announce our plan. The European Commission will announce the plan how to how to reduce our dependency on Russian gas by 2/3 by the end of this year. And the last thing here that I could say, that companies with export to Russia have, which is not surprising, have stopped their export and probably and definitely have some impact on that. I think that's all. You can go to the next slide. I think, yeah, thank you. It's a bit more than 5 minutes, but I did my best.
No, thank you very much. Thank you. And I'm sure that during the event in Lithuania, especially the things that you have shared with us on the last slide will be discussed more and more deeper. So now we are moving to the semiconductors, and I'm giving the floor to Cesar Dunker, DG Grow. So Cesar, yours.
Indeed. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Very good. Okay, I will try to be as speedy as possible as well on this point on semiconductors. So I'm working in the digital transformation of industry unit in DG Grow, specializing on semiconductors, otherwise known as chips. Now, just for a quick refresh, semiconductors or chips are very, very small, micro electronic components that make basically our digital economy function. That's everything from the automotive sector, which was mentioned previously, also to kind of different IoT devices, for example, that can be deployed in the agri-food sector. So it's critical that we get our policy right on chips. And also that we deal with some of the challenges that the European continent faces when it comes to chip manufacturing. So I really want to take this moment to deliver two messages. First of all, the kind of initiative that we have on chips, and second of all, where we're actually going in terms of our broader digitalization, which will of course include the uptake of digital technologies, increasing the demand for chips. So as you may or may not be aware, we have launched the regulation proposal for the European Chip Act, which is a package proposed which sets out a comprehensive set of measures to basically secure the EU's supply, resilience, and technological leadership in some key technologies, and it's built on a pillar structure. So the first pillar is called the CHIPS Initiative for Europe, and this is very much where we're focusing on finding synergies between pre-existing EU research programs, also supporting startups and SMEs, and we intend to launch a CHIPS fund to facilitate access to loans and equity by startups, SMEs, and other companies in the value chain. But what's really important to note is that we're not only focusing on companies within the chip ecosystem, as it were, so companies that are producing microelectronics. We're also looking at the end consumers, so the different companies that have been affected, for example, by the chip shortage that we've seen over the pandemic period. So on pillar 2, what we're trying to do is secure supply, and you may have heard of this before, but the Commission is proposing that we establish first of a kind facilities in Europe. So that is essentially support for businesses that are setting up operations that are not on the continent at the moment. So there are two work strands within this. One is essentially supporting pre-existing organizations called integrated production facilities, and the other one is establishing what we call open EU foundries. So the third pillar is a crisis and response mechanism, and this is really to make sure, you know, that the sort of crisis we've seen in the semiconductor supply chain is anticipated, is mitigated, and Europe is able to a certain extent, of course, knowing that we cannot be fully self-sufficient, is able to support businesses across lots of different ecosystems should there be another shortage in this very, very cyclical and kind of counter-cyclical market that is the semiconductor international marketplace. So those are kind of the three major pillars of the chip proposal itself. Now, alongside that, we've also launched a European chip survey where we have been essentially asking for respondents for the manufacturers of chips, but also the end users of chips. And we're in the process right now of analyzing some of this data to try to figure out, you know, what are the key insights, what is business and or industry needing when it comes to chips, what is the demand right now for certain types of chips, but what is also the future expected demand, so we really can create a policy that is specific to the needs of our industry. So that's kind of the overall work stream that is happening right now in the Commission in regards to chips. In regards to the continual digitalization of industry, I'll also take this opportunity to invite participants to a workshop series that we are doing, which is all about, especially in the context of this Ukraine crisis, is about making sure that we can deploy digital technologies to really go green and to go resilient. So the digital technologies, the digitalization of business is not the end in itself, but we can facilitate, you know, the sustainability, the resilience of our European industry through some digital technologies. And we intend to have workshops in May, focusing on those two kind of thematic areas. So the idea is really to kind of promote some strategic use cases that are helping greening and making our industry more resilient, mainstreaming these practices, you know, by supporting the companies, but also by, you know, mainstreaming solutions within traditional industry, and really working towards these core objectives in our industrial strategy, which is about becoming competitive, becoming green, and becoming resilient. So should you wish to partake in the workshops going forward, or have you know, represent interesting use cases that actually help our industry become more resilient and become more sustainable, then you're very welcome to send me an email. I don't know if it's on the screen, but I can put it in the chat, and I'd be very very happy to hear from you. Thank you very much. I hope I was speedy enough.
Thank you very much. Yes, please share any useful information on the chat so all who staying with us can see it. Also, I wanted to remind that because we are running a bit behind the schedule, for those that are not able to stay with us longer, we, as said at the very beginning, this webinar is being recorded and will be shared. The recording will be shared with all the participants. So please stay with us, but in case you're not able, all relevant information will be shared after the webinar. So now we continue further with the program, and I would like to welcome Dania Gerber with regards to photovoltaics. So please, Daniel, the floor is yours. If Daniel? if we are experiencing technical problems to connect with Daniel right now, maybe we can go to the next speaker. You can, yes, Daniel is having problems to connect. So let's, if Peter can join us, and after that we'll try to connect with Daniel again. Peter, I hope this is fine for you, so we can go.
Yes, no problem.
Okay, I think I managed as well, but happy to wait for the next round then. Go ahead, Peter.
Thank you. So Peter,
hello.
Yes.
Thanks a lot, and a very good morning to everyone. I'm indeed Peter Stalens from the construction unit, and I will give you a quick perspective from the point of view of construction. So I will be also as quick as possible. You can go to the next slide, please. So indeed, a very important message to start with is that from the perspective of construction, wood is very important, and a smooth functioning of the wood value chains, the wood supply chains, is really important. Sometimes it is said that wood is only a marginal part of the whole construction system. Sometimes this is because some figures say that 3% of all the materials used is wood. But this is old figures already. These are figures in terms of volume. If you have a look at value that's being used in construction projects, the average is already 8%. These are also figures from 2019. We see that the demand for wood products in construction projects is rising enormously. There are so many different wood products that are being used on construction sites, roof trusses, structural beams, all kinds of frames for windows and doors, floors, be it laminate, be it parquet, engineered wood, fiberboard, and so on. So apart from the percentages that maybe seem smaller sometimes, it is true that the supply of wood products is really essential for almost every construction project. So next slide, please. So and what we have seen in the wood supply chains and what all people working in the wood industries know is that there was already quite some stress in the whole supply chain of wood, also in starting from 2020, 2021, due to a post-COVID demand rise for all kinds of wood products, not only, of course, in construction sector, but from all other sectors, also from the non-wood processing industries. There was also a rising demand, for example, from the energy industry and so on. So I gave some figures just to show that already in 2020, if you look at all kinds of construction products, at the price evolutions of these construction products, that some wood products are strongest impacted. So already at the end of 2020, we see a very strong impact on veneer and all kinds of wood-based panels and all kinds of wooden construction joinery. So these are the lines that jump out the most compared to all kinds of other products. So this was already the case. This strong stress in these industries, in these products, was already the case in the end of 2021, and of course, with the disruption and the supply shortages now due to the Russian invasion and the sanctions since March 2022, we see, of course, a very huge impact. The impact depends on the product itself, depends on the location, but we see many price increases of up to 30% since the end of February. So in about 5 or 6 weeks, price increases for many wood products of about 30%. Some products, of course, are most affected. For example, plywoods and parquet oak. These are two products where about 25% of the total EU demand was being sourced from Belarus or Russia. Of course, this sourcing has been disrupted. So of course, in these products, we see the most heavy impacts. And we also have, of course, a geographical focus. We see the strongest impacts on the construction projects, and also, of course, on the furniture industry in the countries that are most reliant on, or were most reliant for wood imports, such as Finland, the Baltic countries, Poland, Hungary, and Romania. So the point here is that of course the supply disruptions and the price increases of wood and wood products, they move up very quickly along the value chain and very quickly have a significant impact on construction products and also on construction projects. So the last slide, please. So important point, of course, is that indeed price increases of wood products is maybe not the biggest problem for construction itself. The biggest problem is in fact the uncertainty. Will the price keep on rising? Will the wooden construction products, will they arrive on time, or will they arrive at all? So this uncertainty is very difficult for the construction industry, and this leads to many problems that we see already in the construction industry. We see it happen already, only a little bit more than 1 month after the start of the invasion. Due to this extreme uncertainty, there are big problems for public procurement, because it's extremely hard to make good contracts. And we also already see many postponements of projects by public and also by private clients. So very important to know here is that a well-functioning wood supply chain is very important for the construction industry. Of course, because a well-functioning construction industry is good in itself, but from the point of view of European policy, from our point of view, then it is also very important. For example, to meet all the targets that we set, to meet the climate targets on renovation, to meet all the social targets that we have on affordable housing. So this is why, from the point of view of construction, that we welcome all kinds of initiatives that enhance this supply chain of wood, that support this supply chain of wood. Of course, from our side, from the construction, we are working also a lot on standardization. We have the revised CPR regulation, for example, that where we have a proposal that has been recently proposed by the Commission. We have many more initiatives that you can read in our staff working document on our transition pathway towards green and digital transformation of the construction industry. Of course, we are doing our side, but of course, right now we are looking very hard to all kinds of cooperation with the industries to support the strongly disrupted supply chains towards the construction industry. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I mean, a huge problem you've shared with us, especially apart from the price rises. I mean, the certainty that you mentioned, it's a biggest issue. So obviously, collaboration is welcome in any case. So now we are going back to Daniel. If you hear us now.
I hear you. Do you hear me?
Yes, perfect. Thank you very much. The floor is
Great.
yours.
Thank you very much. I see you can also see me. So first slide, please. My name is Daniel Gerber, and I work also in DG Grow in the unit that deals with the green and circular economy. The focus of my presentation is on photovoltaics, so solar PV panels, which are crucial for the green transition. First, some key facts. Solar energy represents an important and increasing share of the EU's electricity generation, and accelerating renewable energy deployment plays a central role in the success of the European Green Deal. It will also contribute to decreasing EU dependence on imported fossil fuels. And what is also very important for industry is the lowering of energy prices, or the stabilization of energy prices. Solar energy's contribution to this transition will need to grow significantly in order to power an integrated energy system, electrify end-use sectors, and support the targeted rollout of renewable hydrogen, for instance. Commission modeling suggests that meeting the goals of the Green Deal will imply a threefold increase in solar energy generation by 2030. And this is what you can see here on the screen. And an almost tenfold increase of solar PV by 2050. In 2020, for the first time, renewable energy sources overtook fossil fuels as the EU's main electric power source. And solar energy has grown by 18% relative to the previous year, relative from 2020 to 2021. Importantly, the EU has a binding target to increase the share of energy consumed from renewable sources to 32% by 2030, up from around 21 to 22% where we are currently. As you might know, last year the Commission proposed ambitious legislative package, the so-called Fit for 55 package, including a revision of the Renewables Directive and a more ambitious target of 40%, meaning that once this is adopted and in law, this revised directive, it will further and strongly incentivize member states to facilitate even further the expansion of renewables, including solar. What is important to consider is the political context under which this is all happening. With the invasion of Russia and war in Ukraine, the deployment of renewable energy technologies becomes even more important than before. Renewables are crucial for our industry and society in terms of having a steady supply of low-cost energy for electricity and heating. They are crucial for meeting the energy and climate transition targets. And now they are also crucial in terms of our energy security. On 8th of March, the Commission presented the Repower EU communication, and I will put the link in the chat box in a few minutes. And it announced the EU's vision on how to phase out Russian gas by the end of this year by 2/3. This is a huge undertaking. The solutions are described in the Repower communication, and obviously one of them is the front loading of additional solar and wind energy capacity by this year, by an additional 20% of what was originally foreseen in the EU Green Deal proposals. A concrete proposal on Repower EU will be presented in May, together with the solar strategy that I will talk about in the last slide. Next slide, please. Together with colleagues in DG GROW and across the Commission, we prepared an in-depth review a few weeks ago that was published, and I will put the link also in the chat box. This in-depth review was on the strategic dependencies around several technologies and raw materials, and in our unit we focused on solar PV. The three main conclusions are here on the screen. I already talked about the first one. The second conclusion is that while the EU has strengths in downstream segments of the solar PV value chain, it has important strategic dependencies in the manufacturing segments. And the conclusion of the in-depth review, which I will also go a little bit more into detail, is that an appropriate framework is necessary to mitigate the risks of such a dependency. Next slide, please. Here you can see the value chain. These are the different components that make up the solar PV panel, polysilicon, wafers, solar cells, and modules. While the EU produces a good amount of polysilicon, mostly in Germany, it is a dwarf in all other areas, holding, for instance, 1% of global production for solar wafers, 0.4% for solar cells, and 2 to 3% for modules. As we know, China is leading in all steps of this value chain. So in view of such a significant market concentration, it's important to mitigate this big dependency. Chinese imports of Chinese solar panels will always continue to be important for the deployment of solar. But with the volatile situation that started already last year with increased energy prices, increased transport costs, increased manufacturing costs in China, and other external factors that we cannot control, the conclusion is very simple. We have to upscale manufacturing capacity in the EU. Next slide, please. This is already happening. This is a visual that is included in our in-depth review. This is the current manufacturing capacity of the EU solar industry. As you can see, it represents those figures that I already told you about. There is quite a strong polysilicon production, in fact, in only one company. And where we're lacking capacities very clearly is in solar cells, ingots, and wafers. Next slide, please. So the EU industry has already responded and created something called the European Solar Initiative last year. It's a consortium of solar companies and an investors hub, as well as an industry association. And the aim of this initiative is to scale up annual solar production to 20 gigawatt by 2025. And this target applies separately, as you can see here, to each segment, to each of the components. Nevertheless, according to the current trends, the target is expected to be achieved only in the case of polysilicon. Next slide, please. As part of the analysis that we conducted and for the framework that we envisage, these are some of the key ideas. This is also something that was talked about in past cluster events, is the finance aspect, which is absolutely central, the de-risking. Secondly, national policies, and in particular here, one of the major barriers to the deployment of solar, but also to the manufacturing of solar components, are permitting procedures. These need to be streamlined and simplified. Then public funding for research, so EU solar panels aim to be more efficient and more innovative. That's an aspect that will be central to the future development of EU manufacturing capacities, and securing also the relevant raw materials. And like I just said, in terms of innovation, this also means thinking about recyclability, reuse, these kind of aspects, as well as cybersecurity threats. The last slide, please. So what is coming up, which is very important alongside the Repower EU plan that I already talked about, is the EU solar strategy. It will be presented in May at the same time as the Repower EU plans. And the EU solar strategy is a communication that will send a signal. And here it's about signals. The Commissioner for Energy last week at the EU Solar Summit made a speech and also touched strongly on the need for the manufacturing capacity. And this is a news snippet from Reuters, but this is about the signal. And indeed, the objective of the EU solar strategy is to help unlock solar energy's potential to contribute to EU climate and energy targets. And it will analyze the state of play and propose measures to accelerate deployment, enhance system integration, highlight societal value. It will also consider avenues to foster EU competitiveness, and a chief component of it will be also the manufacturing aspects. It will also propose a European rooftop initiative to boost roof-mounted solar PV. Finally, so as part of the Repower EU plans and the EU solar strategy, There is a third element that will be presented also in May, is the Commission's guidance and recommendation on permitting. This, as I said, is one of the big barriers, both to deployment of solar technology, but also the manufacturing aspects. And via these recommendations, the Commission is bringing up new ambitious ideas and best practices to help member states shorten permitting procedures that currently can last up to 5 or more years for companies to deploy solar and or wind technologies. What will also be very important is the aspects related to digitalizing permitting authorities, as well as the increasing of staff, reskilling and upskilling. In conclusion, the EU solar strategy, Repower EU, and the permitting work are aimed to further incentivize the business case for deploying and for scaling up manufacturing of solar PV in the EU. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this overview, and I would like to thank all the panelists being with us today from DG GROW at European Commission. Very useful information. It's in the meantime shared, useful links are shared in the chat. And I would like to thank all staying with us, though we are a bit behind the schedule. Again, those that have to leave us earlier, we will be sharing the information after the webinar together with the recording and all useful links and information. So now we are going to the next part, a topic that is also going to be presented during the event in Lithuania. We will be talking about funding opportunities and financial schemes. So I would like to welcome Marco Francini, Office European Investment Bank, Regional Group for the Baltic States.
Hello, good afternoon. So my name is Marco Francini. I'm the head of the EIB Group Office for the Baltic State. I will initially explain what the European Investment Bank is. Then I will touch upon, which kind of product we can serve. And third, I will give some example of project we financed in Lithuania last year. So next slide. Next slide. So the EIB is the European Investment Bank is the Bank of the EU. Our shareholders are the 27 member states. We are a bank, so we issue AAA bonds in capital market, and then we finance projects that are in line with the EU priorities that are climate, environment, innovation, SMEs, and infrastructure. 2021, we arrived to almost 95 billion euro. This quarter is located in Luxembourg, and we opened the office for the Baltic State in February 2020. Next slide, please. So we're a bank, so we are providing financial products. Financial products are mainly loans to both public and private sector counterpart, but we also participate to PPPs and project finance project. We can also do hybrid mezzanine product as well as venture debt. That is a product that I will talk more later that is dedicated to very innovative companies that we hope will become unicorns. We also have unfunded products that are risk sharing and guarantee product that we offer to financial intermediary, so to banks, in order for them to support SMEs. So risk sharing product and guarantees are portfolio or risk relief product. Next slide, please. We also offer technical advice with our advisory hub. The technical advice can be both for a project base, so we support the bankability of the project, so the proper project preparation, but at the same time we can also do sectorial studies, for example, on circular economy, digitalization of SMEs, for example, that would support ministries or association for knowledge sharing and dissemination of knowledge. Next slide, please. So we are also the EU Climate Bank. In 2007, we were the first one to issue the so-called climate awareness bond, so the first bond, and as of today, we are the largest issuer of green bonds worldwide. In the end of 2019, the Board of Governors took an historic decision. We will not support any more fossil fuel-based project. We will increase our lending to climate action project to 50% by 2025, and last year it was 43%. And then we will align all our activities to the Paris Agreement. Next slide, please. Next slide again, thank you. Now, here is just a brief overview of what we have done in Lithuania last year. So overall, we have supported the Lithuanian economy with around 454 million euro, equaling 0.84% of GDP. That is a significant support to the Lithuanian economy. We had a record high number of transactions with 14 contracts signed by both EIB and EIF. The main scheme that we deployed last year was the so-called European Guarantee Fund. The European Guarantee Fund was a part of the rescue package from the EU to support businesses that were suffering from the economic impact of the COVID-19. Last year, we also had a transaction with the two national promotion institutions of Lithuania, Invega and Viva. With the transaction we done with these two counterparts, we have supported financing for SMEs and mid-caps in the region. In addition to this, we have signed the first venture debt deal in Lithuania, and we also supported a project in the environment and energy efficiency in Vilnius with the renovation of the water and wastewater infrastructure and the district heating network. Next slide. Okay, so this is an example of the project that we financed. So Brolis Sensor Technologies is a company located here in Lithuania. They are a high-tech company in the sensor technology. Their technology is based on spectrometry photonics, and the application here can be both healthcare but also in the veterinary sector. And we have supported it with 7.5 million. So this 7.5 million is a so-called venture debt that would allow them for a stable and long-term financing in order to support their R&D and growth company. This is really a product that we've been deploying since last 5-6 years that really targets innovation and high-tech companies and companies that we hope will become unicorns one day. Next slide. So last year, we also provided 43 million euro for the modernization of the Vilnius district heating infrastructure. This is a loan where basically the EIB is financing part of the investment plan of the company. So the company basically provides us with an investment plan. We decide to finance around 50% of their investment, and this will allow them to have a network that is more sustainable, more efficient. In the same project, we will also build an additional biomass boiler that will allow for major diversification of energy resources, and at the same time also to expand the network. And this is an example of support. So before for Brolis, it was an example of support to the private sector. This is an example of support to a municipal company. Next slide, please. Then support to SME, this one that is really important. We've done last year, and mainly thanks to this European Guarantee Fund. Basically, we have cooperated with 9 financial intermediaries, out of which 2 are the national institution, to make available guarantees, both from EIB and EIF, to all these financial intermediaries that supported SMEs. Next slide. So in conclusion, the European Investment Bank, and this is what I'm going to talk more in detail when there will be the workshop. We have a wide range of financial product and advisory services to support the economy. We have in the IB a department of 400 between engineers and economists that are expert in their field. So we have energy expert, we have life science expert, we have that could really that their main job is of course to do the technical, financial, economic due diligence of project, but also they participate to the preparation of the project. We are ready to support Lithuania with our traditional product from our EIB own resources. But another important thing is that in the beginning of March, we have signed with the European Commission the investor agreement. So starting second, let's say second quarter or second half this year, we'll be able to deploy in cooperation with the European Commission the InvestEU program that will allow us to deploy instruments that are, let's say, higher risk than our normal activities. So this is really, in a nutshell, what the EIB is. And of course, I would welcome any of your questions or see you in November. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marco, for this overview. And as you said, this topic will be further discussed during the event in Vilnius, in Lithuania. So now I would like to welcome Dr. Jan-Philipp Kramer, who is a team leader, data and policy at the European Cluster Collaboration Platform, as well as Prognos. And he will be talking about, will give an overview about the supply chains and multi-clusters. Jan, the floor is yours.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. I cannot see my picture yet, but maybe that's on purpose. Pleasure to give you a sneak preview, I would say, about our input paper that we will be presenting to you, everybody who will be there in the conference in Vilnius. And when we go to the next slide, I can already start to provide some first insights. What this input paper will do will give you a regional perspective on both the cluster landscape, but also the economic profile of Lithuania. It will look into very important features of the trading system and the supply chains, and by that provide a foundation for the discussion, and also I think connect to many of the things that were said earlier in today's presentations about also certain supply chain challenges and risks. When looking at the economic profile of Lithuania, we can say that in the past decades, in fact, we've seen a quite a positive development when it comes to the overall economy. Lithuania was able to catch up when it comes to its GDP per capita, growing above EU average for a good number of years. Obviously, now we have the war, which is terrible. And besides the humanitarian drama, it of course also has economic implications. What's important when looking at the Lithuanian economy is that the SME sector has been quite important over the last years. It provides many jobs in the economy as overall in Europe, but even more so in the Lithuanian case. And also the SME sector has been quite relevant and actually quite strong when it comes to driving innovation in the country. Lithuania is a country with an export surplus, and we see that the trade balance is in that regard the highest among the Baltic states, in fact, and therefore we can already see that the importance of the relations, especially in the single market, but also in other domains. And I will show you some insights on that in just a minute. when it comes to the sectoral configuration of the economy, we see overall that the service sector dominates, but that still there's a quite significant industrial and manufacturing base in the country. This is especially true when looking at the gross value added, and among the top 10 sectors as regards the GVA productivity, we find 5 from the manufacturing industry, including the manufacturing of refined petroleum products, including basic pharmaceuticals, including chemicals and chemical products and similar. But we also, and this is, I think, the interesting configuration of the Lithuanian economy, have a very dynamic ICT-driven company base. There are 37,000 employees in more than 2,000 ICT companies in Lithuania, and this is also reflected in the cluster landscape with many cross-innovation activities. When you look at the map, and it shows you different profiles of economies, this is also confirmed in a way. We have the Vilnius and capital region, which is strongly driven by creative and digital, and then we have the remaining country, which has a strong manufacturing and agri profile. Looking at the cluster landscape, we already learned on the next slide, please, from Christina earlier on about the profile. She showed you an even larger map with more cluster organizations. Here we focus on those which are listed on the European Cluster Collaboration Platform, and I take this as an invitation also to register your cluster organizations on the ECCP. And you see that among those 50 plus clusters, 26 are registered on the ECCP, which is a quite high number in the region. Many of those concentrated in the Vilnius county, 70% of those cluster organizations. And there are, of course, some specific features about those. I will not go into much detail. We have a number of quite large cluster organizations in terms of their membership structure, but we also have a good number which are smaller organizations, more specialized organizations. When it comes to their member structure, one point to emphasize is that also here SMEs play an even stronger role than compared to the EU average, with 74% of the members being SMEs, and the EU average is 71%. So a slight stronger representation here. As we are already quite advanced in time, I would like to look at the last slide here that we have prepared on the trade patterns and supply chains. And I can already promise that in the presentation in Vilnius, we will give even more detail about this when it comes to the relevant sectors, but also when it comes to the relevant commodities, even with very recent data. Here we have the most important trading partners from the Lithuanian perspective, both in terms of imports and exports. And I think as we all know, the trading relationships right now are, from various perspectives, a key matter of strategic decisions and discussions. We see that on the importing side, on the left hand, the top 10 most important trading partners within a volume in 2019 of around 15 billion euros. Clearly, the EU member states represented among those 10 most important partners are a key and dominating source. So 6 out of the 10 countries listed here are European member state, EU member states, accounting for 9.4 billion euros in imports. And also, even looking closer to the Baltics, we can see this, that both Latvia and Estonia important partners when it comes to imports. But you also see that besides Poland and Germany, the imports from Russia are very significant, making up to 21% of the imports and 3.2 billion in 2019. And therefore, this is something to watch. When it comes to the exports, we have a slightly different picture. We have a total volume of around 9.7 billion euros, which goes to the EU member states. So also here, 6 out of the 10 top exporting nations are within the European single market. 32% even to the Baltics, with both Latvia and Estonia being very relevant locations, but also overall in the Scandinavian sphere, you find Sweden and Norway on the map. But also here, as you can see, Russia is a quite relevant export market, and we know that for certain commodities, both on the imports and exporting side, this has quite relevant implications. So I will not speak more about the disruptions in supply chains. The colleagues from the Commission have already given some examples on these, and clearly we also see those for the Baltics and the Lithuanian context, and we will address those in the presentation in Vilnius in more details. So I hope to see you all there, and passing back to Theodora. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jan. And yes, the input paper, as you said, will be presented in depth and delivered during the event in Lithuania. So as I encouraged all the speakers earlier to try to be as fast as possible presenting, because we are quite advanced with the time. I'm supposed now to give you a practical information with regards to the run of the overall event on the 26th and 27th of April. So if my colleagues can go on the next slide, you can see, so the 26th of April is the Clusters Meet Regions event. It's taking place in Vilnius Town Hall for those being in place, and also will be available for online in Zoom. Registration is open. For those that you haven't already registered, you can visit the European Cluster. The link is on the European Cluster Collaboration platform, as well as my colleagues will share it in the chat, so you can register to attend for both days through the registration form. So going on the next slide, we can see this is the agenda for the first day on the 26th of April. The agenda is also published on the website already, and during the next week we will be completing with all the speakers and names, but from today you really received a good information about the topics that will be discussed during the event on the 26th. So if we go on the next slide, on the 27th is the matchmaking event. So also the matchmaking event will take place on site for those that are with us in Vilnius, and also online. Online is happening through the B2Match platform. So when you register to attend for the both days or only for the matchmaking event, you will be redirected so to make the registration through the B2Match. It is also shared, the link is shared on the chat, as well as in the European Cluster Collaboration platform, and will be shared with you after the event today. So if we go on the next slide, this is the agenda, draft agenda for the matchmaking event day. You see it starting with the opening in the pitching session. We will speak later, and on the next slide we will speak about the pitching sessions. This is an option that it is given during the time of the registration, so you can decide to make your pitch with regards to a specific project or your organization. So there is a special box you can tick, and we will be in touch with you. So to debrief and to make to prepare you for that session. If you can go on the next slide. Yes, this is exactly when you register, you see this option. So you can complete and give us some brief information about your project or entity. And as I said, we will get back to you with regards to the briefing. So if we can go on the next slide. This is with regards to the B2Match platform. I believe many of you have been already participating in the different matchmaking events, but this is, you will be redirected so to make your registration through the B2Match, which is exactly for the matchmaking event. Please be aware that if any problems, we can always support. You can write us, you can support me. My colleagues will share our contacts, but also we are going to run a special webinar, technical webinar, that will provide all the information about the technical aspects to participate. So before going to really the end, some principles to remember to the antitrust compliance. It's shared with you on the screen, but I'll just make a couple of them also the notes. So exchange of commercial information is kept to the minimum necessary and limited both in time and to resolving related supply challenges. Particularly sensitive information is prices, discounts, costs, sales, commercial strategies, expansion plans and investments, customers and suppliers lists, etc. Do not exchange such information with your direct competitors in relation to competing products. If talking with a direct competitor at events, please keep notes on the subject discussed. So with this, I think we are going to the end. Once again, apologies for extending the time, but obviously it was really important to give a chance all the topics to be addressed. If you have many links have been shared, but if you have questions, as been said, please get back to us. Don't hesitate to write us at contact@clustercollaboration.eu. We will keep updating the website. We will send you information on with the recording of this session, together with the slides. And please be aware of the important dates. The registration for Clusters Meet Region and the matchmaking event is closing on the 20th of April. And just has been addressed, we will be running a technical webinar on 21st of April. So once again, thank you very much for being with us today. We hope we managed to give really a good overview of what we will be presenting in Vilnius on the 26th and 27th of April. And once again, thank you for being with us today.